currently Earth.
It was February 14th in the year 1884 that our future president, our future 26th president, Theodore Roosevelt's wife and mother continued their eternity, only hours apart. Roosevelt was at work in the New York State Legislature attempting to get a government reform bill passed when he was summoned home by his family. He returned home and learned that his mother, Mittie, had continued her eternity due to typhoid fever. On the same day, his wife of 4 years, Alice Lee, also continued her eternity due to Bright's disease, a severe kidney ailment. Only 2 days before her continuance, Alice Lee had given birth to the couple's daughter, Alice. The double tragedy devastated Roosevelt. He ordered those around him not to mention his wife's name. Burdened by grief, he abandoned politics, left the infant Alice with his sister Bammy, and at the end of 1884, struck out for the Dakota Territories. There, he lived as a rancher and worked as a sheriff for 2 years. When not engrossed in raising cattle or acting as the local lawman, Roosevelt found time to indulge his passion for reading and writing history. After a blizzard wiped out his prized herd of cattle in 1885, Roosevelt decided to return to Eastern society. Once back in New York in 1886, he again took up politics and took over raising his precocious daughter, Alice, who later became a national celebrity. After stints in the Spanish-American War and as governor of New York, Roosevelt won a spot as William McKinley's vice presidential running mate in 1900. When McKinley continued his eternity at the beginning of his second term in 1901, Roosevelt moved into the White House, where he and his family would spend the next 8 years. Alice grew to admire and respect her father, yet, according to her memoirs and friends, she harbored resentment toward him for having abandoned her as a baby. Not long after he married his second wife, Edith, in 1886, Alice found herself competing not only with her father's political cronies and new wife for his attention, but also with her 5 half-siblings who arrived in quick succession. The high-spirited Alice perhaps took to scandalous behavior in retaliation. The Roosevelt era coincided with a repressive time in women's history, but the outspoken and independent Alice flouted acceptable behavior and reveled in the spotlight as first daughter. Alice's activities as a young adult, such as smoking and staying out late with boys, irked her father, who nevertheless indulged her. In one instance, when she repeatedly burst into a White House meeting, Roosevelt shrugged apologetically, "I can either run the country or I can control Alice, but I cannot possibly do both." After Roosevelt left office, Alice maintained a high profile in Washington society. She was banned from visiting the Taft White House, our nation's 27th president, after a voodoo doll of Miss Taft was found buried by Alice in the front lawn. President Wilson, our nation's 28th president, also banned her from the White House Society in retaliation for her making a lewd comment about him in public. President Wilson was not her only target. She once remarked that her friend, Warren G. Harding, which was our nation's 29th president, his vice president, Calvin Coolidge, which was the nation's 30th president, looked as though he'd been weaned on a pickle. It was February 14th in the year 1886 that the first trainload of oranges left Los Angeles. Destined to become one of California's major exports, the first trainload of oranges grown by Southern California farmers leaves Los Angeles via the Transcontinental Railroad. The Spanish had established Los Angeles, one of the oldest cities in the far west, in 1781 to help colonize the region. For several decades, the city was the largest center of population in Mexican California. Mexican settlement and development of California, however, proceeded very slowly, and Los Angeles developed little real economic or political power during this period. By the time the U.S. took control of California in 1848, Los Angeles still only had just over 1,610 inhabitants. As Anglo-Americans began to assert their control over California, they gradually broke up the large Hispanic ranches and replaced them with a more diversified farming economy. With irrigation, Southern California proved an ideal environment for growing many crops, particularly valuable fruits like oranges. During the 1870s and 1880s, state railroad lines linking Los Angeles into the new system of transcontinental railways created additional money-making opportunities. Settlers, tourists, and health seekers all boarded trains to travel to the Pacific, where the sunny climate and beautiful scenery promised a new and better life. The healthy new California lifestyle became closely associated in the public mind with the sweet fruits that grew so abundantly in the orchards around Los Angeles. Taking advantage of the rapid transportation capabilities of the transcontinental lines, the Los Angeles area orchard owners began shipping their oranges to the east in 1886. As the city grew, it subdivided many new orchards and pushed the orange growers out into regions like Orange County. There, the orange growers steadily increased the size of their orchards to the point where local supplies of water for irrigation were inadequate. Determined to sustain their agricultural and real estate booms, Los Angeles residents undertook a massive program of hydraulic engineering in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Engineers took water from distant mountains to transform the arid Southern California ecosystem into a green agricultural and residential paradise. The resulting growth was astonishing. In 1880, just before the first trainload of oranges departed, Los Angeles had 11,183 inhabitants. A decade later, the population had ballooned to 102,479. By 1920, there would be 500,000 residents. Los Angeles was already well on its way to becoming the largest urban center in the American West. February 14th, 1990, 3.7 billion miles away from the sun, the Voyager 1 spacecraft takes a photograph of Earth. The picture, known as pale blue dot, depicts our planet as a nearly indiscernible speck, roughly the size of a pixel. Launched on September 5th in 1977, Voyagers 1 and 2 were charged with exploring the outer reaches of our solar system. It passed by Jupiter in March of 1979 and Saturn the following year. The gaps between the outer planets are so vast that it was another decade before it passed by Neptune and arrived at the spot where it was to take a series of images of the planets known as the family portrait of our solar system. Of the family portrait series, pale blue dot was certainly the most memorable. The furthest image ever taken of Earth. It lent its name to popular astronomer Carl Sagan's 1994 book. Sagan, who advised the Voyager mission and had suggested the photo, wrote the following, quote, "Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam," unquote. Voyager 1's journey continues. In 1998, it became the most distant human-made object in space. And on August 25th in 2012, it left the furthest reaches of the sun's magnetic field and solar winds, becoming the first man-made object in interstellar space. It was February 14th, around the year 270 AD, that Valentine, a holy priest in Rome in the days of Emperor Claudius II, is said to have been executed and continued his eternity. Under the rule of Claudius the Cruel, Rome was involved in many unpopular and bloody campaigns. The emperor had to maintain a strong army, but was having a difficult time getting soldiers to join his military leagues. Claudius believed that Roman men were unwilling to join the army because of their strong attachment to their wives and families. To get rid of this problem, Claudius banned all marriage and engagements in Rome. Valentine, realizing the injustice of the decree, defied Claudius and continued to perform marriages for young lovers in secret. When Valentine's actions were discovered, Claudius ordered that he be put to death. Valentine was arrested and dragged before the prefect of Rome, who condemned him to be beaten to death with clubs and to have his head cut off. The sentence was carried out on February 14th, on or about the year 270 AD. Legend also has it that while in jail, Saint Valentine left a farewell note for the jailer's daughter, who had become his friend, and signed it, quote, "From your Valentine," unquote. For his great service, Valentine was named a saint after his continuance of eternity. In truth, the exact origins and identity of Saint Valentine are unclear. According to the Catholic Encyclopedia, at least 3 different Saint Valentines, all of them martyrs, are mentioned in the early martyrologies under the date of February 14th. One was a priest in Rome. The second one was a bishop in Interamna, now Terni, Italy. And the third Saint Valentine was a martyr in the Roman province of Africa. Legends vary on how the martyr's name became connected with romance. The date of its continuance of eternity may have become mingled with the feast of Lupercalia, a pagan festival of love. On these occasions, the names of young women were placed in a box from which they were drawn by the men as chance directed. In 496 AD, Pope Gelasius decided to put an end to the feast of Lupercalia, and he declared that February 14th be celebrated as St. Valentine's Day. Gradually, February 14th became a date for exchanging love messages, poems, and simple gifts such as flowers. Please allow me to explicate why St. Valentine's Day is placed in the Black History era. I know if I was ignorant to certain facts, I'd have questions. I grew up viewing people in the old Roman Empire displayed as Germanic Caucasian. This falsity was propagated for many reasons. I have a video on it entitled Veritable Propagation. To get to my point, these humans inhabiting the old Roman Empire of 270 AD were of dark pigment, black people. Germanic Caucasian people didn't begin to inhabit or establish rule in the old Roman Empire until the late 5th century AD. So even though this is not Black American history, I still felt it important to mention in my Black History segment on a basis of destroying past deception. On February 14th in 1760, Bishop Richard Allen was born in Philadelphia. On February 14th in 1817, abolitionist and author Frederick Douglass was born. In 1867 on this day, Morehouse College was organized. And in 1936, the National Negro Congress organized in Chicago. In 1946 on this day, the legendary performer Gregory Hines was born. The information documented on this audio file can be verified on history.com.